What's up, everybody? Just wanted to make a quick video in response to a comment I received earlier today where the individual was asking to see how we can go from a problem to documenting the problem, building the SOP, and then ultimately automating that SOP. And this right here is an example of an automation that I've created, which is my client onboarding automation. And I've got 42 other active automations within my agency. So first things first, let us see what an SOP is, right? And the way that I'm defining it is just based on what I'm able to find online, right? So if I were to search up an SOP template, we're going to get a bunch of different options that pop up over here. And there's also like SOP applications that you can leverage and things like that. But they mostly all follow the same idea, right? Where one, they are defining what the purpose of the SOP is, right? So the purpose of this SOP is to do this. And if we were to go to any of these documents, which I should have opened this actually, but it's over here. This SOP's goal is this, right? And all of them, they're doing the exact same thing. And then the next thing they're doing is they're defining the steps required to accomplish that specific task, right? So step 1, 2, 3, 4, right? We go to this SOP over here. Step 1, clearly outlined. Step 2, step 3. And a lot of these are like menial administrative tasks, like log in, right? Perform this, do that, right? And if we were to look at this, for example, it's like the hiring manager communicates the need for the position to HR. The hiring manager then does this. The hiring manager then does that, right? That's how all of these SOP documents tend to go. And so if you're noticing the path, the common trend here is that there's a defined out there's a defined scope, the defined goal, and then there's steps to accomplish that defined goal. And if you're in a business, that process is going to be coming up often, right? That's what makes it a standard operating procedure, something coming up often that is clearly defined in its scope, right? And so if we were to look at my internal operations, we've got this over here, which is my workflow, right? So client comms, right? I have to communicate with clients often. And so one of the things that you have to consider when you're communicating with clients is one, who am I communicating with, right? That is one thing that you would probably, in fact, this outlines it perfectly, right? The hiring manager communicates the need of the position to HR. In my case, the sales rep, the owner, the whatever communicates to the client. Who's the client? You have to sorry. Sorry about that. You have to define who the client is, the email recipient, right? And we've got automations for that. And then once you've determined that, you have to determine what email are you going to be sending? What subject line are you going to be sending? And this is what we leverage with our different options. So we've got manual email, performance report, onboarding email. All of these have different criterias in place for, different templates in place for them. And one thing to consider is a performance report. This is going to be coming up on a weekly basis, right? Um, while an onboarding email, this is only going to be coming up once. So the trigger to create this task shouldn't be the same for every single one, right? And so for the onboarding, for the performance report, that pops up every day and it has a due date set up for it. The onboarding email, this comes up during the client onboarding process. And so once we've onboarded the client, they've gone through all of these different steps and it's active, that's when we create the specific email that it comes over here. And this automation section, this is what has the information outlined for us, right? Something else to consider, a testimonial request, an upsell request. Do you have a cadence for that? Is that something that's going to be coming up on a monthly basis? Is that something that would be coming up when results are very high? Is that something that comes up when you just had an amazing like deal close or something like that? It's really up to you, right? But the way that I leverage like SOPs and these things is defining the purpose And since I am a one person agency, I do this inside my head. But if I was a COO of an agency, for example, I might define it in a document like this so that everyone knows. And then the procedure, right? And the scope, all of that on a document. And then the procedure, this step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that is what you're seeing inside here. So this automation, right? So if we were to look at this automation, the first thing it's doing is fetching the task, adding the client to Smart Lead, searching for them in Stripe, adding a channel in Slack, adding different properties in HubSpot, logging into Smart Lead, creating different views in ClickUp, and back again. We go back to the templates that are presented. Step 1 is log into the digital maintenance platform and identify the equipment requiring maintenance. That's step 1. And so we go back to our step 1, right? Get the task so that we know all of the information that this client already has. Do they already have a Slack channel, right? So when we get the Slack channel and we realize that the Slack channel does not actually exist, why are we going to create a brand new Slack channel? We don't need to. The Slack channel already exists, so we're not actually going to keep going, right? If we search Stripe over here, we find out that Stripe doesn't exist. We're going to create it. Or if it does exist, we're just going to leave it, right? Same idea, right? And so that's how I think of these SOPs, right? And so you can actually have them in write-up format, or you can have them in an automated fashion like this. Next thing I want to touch on is as you're going through these different SOPs, as you're going through these different processes, so if you were to set it up for someone to do it manually, how can you think about it? And this is how I think about it, right? So we go to the domain setup process. We can set up different domains and they have to go through all of these different steps until they are done, right? And so all of these different steps have different instructions. And so, for example, we can go into the automation section and then we can look at DKIM. That's a good one. So it's like domain setup, DKIM, added to ClickUp. Let's look at this SOP, right? So we click edit on this, and you notice that when the DKIM is here, the domain platform is already set up. We add this comment, right? And so domain setup step 3, activate Google DKIM here. This has a Google URL, right? And then this has a Microsoft URL. And obviously this is super basic instructions. And the reason why it's basic is because we're the ones setting up the domains. If we had a VA doing this, we might have more comprehensive instructions. We can even put like a Loom video. We can put more detailed comprehensive instructions. But these step 1, step 2, step 3, these are specific and relevant to this particular section, which is DKIM added. And that's how I like to think of it, right? I like to think of it as in comments or checklists, but instead of making it a long, huge document for defined processes, I have specific snippets for specific sections of the place. But here's the cool thing. I don't even use these anymore because the moment the DKIM is added, it actually goes here and that's what does everything. Kevin, go. And so the moment the DKIM is added in ClickUp, we send it to this webhook. And so let's go into the webhook and let me show you what that does so that you see, like, this is what would normally require someone to do it, right? So we go DKIM. So this is step 3. Right? And so in this right here, we set up the DMARC records, the open tracking, and then depending on whether it's Google or Microsoft, we're going to be adding the DKIM records, right? And so that's how I think of SOPs, right? It's getting from step 0 to the final step. I don't write it up because I'm a one-person agency. I already know how all of this stuff works. But in the back of my head, I'm thinking about it exactly how these documents outline it. And obviously, I've not taken any training for anything like this. So if I got anything wrong, if you think there's a better way to do this stuff, leave a comment.